Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer live stream on the first day of October 2023. I'm Robin Chopra, and I mention the date because this live stream show will end up on YouTube permanently for anyone to watch at a later date. So if you've come across it in 2096, I think I can safely say I'm no longer around, and Ross here is a very old boy indeed. If I'm honest, the whole thing baffles me somewhat, but fortunately, Ross is here to keep a modern eye on proceedings and to support his rather more ancient colleague. What I find truly extraordinary is that I'm able to sit here in my home in Oxfordshire in England and speak to loads of you live right now in your own homes all over the world. I know it's second nature to so many of you, but for me, it's still an incredible novelty. And I'm so pleased to see you all. Thank you so much for the interest you take in our efforts. Now, we're here at a very exciting time for the Cotswold Explorer. Perhaps most exciting of all is the fact that around 55,000 of you lovely people have subscribed to our channel, making us, by a country mile, the most successful of all the non-commercial Cotswold information channels that there are. So today we're here in my dining room with lots of clever sort of technology to celebrate your kindness, your loyalty and persistence in bringing us to this place. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. I ought also to warn you just a little, that there is a sort of element of chaos about this, because as many of you will know, we have 2 dogs and they are likely to interrupt us at any moment, but you'll bear with us, I'm sure. Now, I think it's fair to say that neither Ross nor I ever imagined in our wildest dreams that we'd gather so much support from all over the globe. It's heartwarming, really, to know that there are so many of you who share our enthusiasm for the slightly esoteric delights of medieval churches and beautiful countryside. Oh, and of course, wonderful spooky horror and ghost stories. Roll on Halloween. Now, this moment also celebrates the publication of our Cotswold Explorer edition of the Highways and Byways in Oxford and the Cotswolds by Herbert Evans. Many of you will be aware that this book has been our constant companion since we started this journey, and a wonderful companion it's been. It was published in 1905 and provided for us a perfect insight into how the Cotswolds have changed over the last 130 years odd. Evans's wonderful, erudite, educated descriptions of the world through which he cycled at the beginning of the 20th century have given us the basis for our own view of the same countryside 130 years on. I remain astonished by how recognizable Evans' world remains, and that despite the best efforts of the hugely powerful development companies, the Cotswolds remain breathtakingly beautiful. In places remote and completely unaltered, and in others different but still lovely. This book will reward anyone carrying it with them when visiting the region, and his slightly gossipy view of life in early 20th century England will absorb anyone interested in the history of the area, even from a distance. Later in the show, I'll let you know how to lay your hands on a copy, if you feel inclined, and I'm sure there'll be various prompts on the screen, which you'll have to forgive me for not really knowing about, but there will be, I'm sure, to help you buy one if you choose. Also, later on, we will tell you about our new series planned for the next couple of years. It seems a sort of natural progression for us to take a detailed look at the great country homes in the area, from the amazing places still privately owned and sometimes lived in by the same family since pre-Norman times, to great houses now in the hands of the increasingly important National Trust, and some great houses that have found different ways to survive the difficulties of keeping up these estates by, for example, dividing them up into flats or even founding special communities to share the building and maintain it between them. It's going to be a fascinating project for us, And it looks likely that we'll start with one of the most famous houses and families in the region, Stanway House and the Weems family. I'm really looking forward to that. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, the start of October brings on our important spooky month of the year, where we tell ghostly stories and horrific tales to give you gentle shivers during the autumn months. We will be filming that over the next few weeks and sharing it with you as we go. Definitely Spooksville. So that's some of what the next hour or so holds. And now, of course, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the young man without whom none of this would have been possible. My invaluable techie, drone-flying, camera-wielding partner in crime, Ross Arrowsmith. Afternoon, Ross.
Hello, Robin.
Very nice to see you.
Yeah, nice.
Say hello, everybody around the world. Say hello.
Hello, everybody. And it's very, very weird to be on this side of the camera.
I bet it is.
Very strange. And probably strange for the audience as well. But hello.
Well, let's see how photogenic it is. We've been wasting him all this time. Now, Ross, the biggest and most important part of this live stream, of course, is gathering questions from our kind viewers and doing our best to answer them. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this will be very much a joint effort from us. There will, I know, be lots of questions to which I simply have no idea of the answer. So we'll be working together to do our best to come up with answers for you, all of you. So please send any questions to, I believe I'm right in saying, well, you'll tell me, Ross, there's something in the bottom right-hand corner of
That's right. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a chat window. Just leave a comment in there. We can see the comments piling up and we can show them. And we have some questions people have already sent in. So.
You've already got some, haven't you? Yes, you've given me advance notice of a few. This is sort of cheating, really, but I understand this. This is which is good. Shall I start by answering the first of our questions? Is that a good idea?
Yes, why not?
All right, let's do that. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I said this is actually amazingly opportune. The first question that arrived here is from, it's quite difficult to tell. People's names are always different, but I think somebody probably called A. Riley. Could be. And the question is, could you present a map to explain exactly where the Cotswolds are located? Also, my favorites are your YouTube ghost stories. He says, your voice is entertaining. That's very kind of you. But also a dog's view of the Cotswolds. Now, that's an intriguing one. We will definitely look at that. Meanwhile, however, a map. Now, I'm sure there are all kinds of technical ways in which we could now put a map on the screen and all that kind of stuff. But we're trying to show you that we're beginners at all of this. I have a little map of the Cotswolds. It's the perfect. I'm going to try and make sure that it is visible for you. Now, this is the bottom half of England, as you will see. And the Cotswolds is this shaded bit in blue here. Now, the thing about the Cotswolds boundaries is that they vary. We've been quite lax in our approach to where the boundaries of the Cotswolds are. There's an area of outstanding natural beauty. This is an official designation that is given by government to certain areas of the country which are particularly wonderful and need protecting. And the Cotswolds is one of those. And that region runs roughly north from Tetbury up to Edge Hill. And it includes most of the great famous Cotswold villages. But the Cotswolds actually is a hill range, a limestone hill range that runs all the way from Edge Hill in the north down to Bath, right down on the Bristol Channel. So, and I can show you that, it runs right down to the end here, where Bath is about there. So actually, the Cotswolds is a greater area than the outstanding area of outstanding natural beauty suggests. That has given us license, ladies and gentlemen, and you will find that we sometimes visit places that are not within that specific area. We always get notes from people to complain about that fact, but it gives us more freedom. And the great city of Bath remains in our sights. We haven't got down there yet, but we will one day. It's one of the most beautiful cities in the whole of the country, and it's built, of course, of the great Cotswold stone. So that's where the Cotswolds is. It is that area. It's a hilly country, rather strange, actually, because it has a plateau on the top, which is where the great sheep farming history that it has took place. And these thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of sheep graze the top, rather barren hills of the Cotswold. But then it's covered in these wonderful cutting valleys, which those of you who followed us will know about. And they are so beautiful, cut mainly by ice and water into the hills, steep-sided, wonderfully wooded valleys, where the villages hide in their cozy little valleys. It's a wonderful part of the world, and we hope you will come and visit it. You really should.
That's a very good.
Is that a comprehensive
good
answer?
Explanation? I think we've got a question about the dogs.
I
think you'd better take that one.
Shall I look after this? I ought to bring them in, really, but I think we can safely say that
is out there standing on the table in the garden. So
yes,
he's
typical of him. He's totally out of control. He's standing on our garden table, absolutely not allowed, but he's sunning himself and looking fine. There are we have two dogs, in case some of you have never seen us before. Widget and Gizmo. They've been with us right through the journey of our Cotswold travels. Widget is our original dog. He's a lovely old fellow. He was born in Lechley, just up the road. He's half miniature Schnauzer and half Border Terrier. He's now about 12 or 13 years old and getting on a bit, if we're honest. He moves a little more slowly, but he's in very good nick and is utterly charming. He's a complete dog, if you'll forgive the phrase, which means that we've been able to have some of his children, which has been rather wonderful. And many years ago now, he had a liaison with a little Jack Russell, of whom he was extremely fond, in our garden in the house we had before this one. And he had 8 puppies. And that's rather wonderful because one of his daughters went to live in Edinburgh and gave birth about 1.5 years ago to Gizmo, the second one of our dogs, who, if you put them together, you will see they bear no relation to one another at all. It's impossible to convince anybody that they have any connection whatever. But Gizmo is lanky and long, mischievous, hunts, does a lot of jumping, is a fantastic animal. We adore him. He's a fantastic creature, and will continue to be the star of the show when dear old Widget is no longer with us, which, being in the nature of dogs, won't be all that much longer. Gizmo, I'm very, very, very reluctant to suggest who his parentage is. And when you see him, you'll know why. And anyway, he'll turn up, no doubt, later in the program.
That's good. I think that's the dog
there you are.
point.
That's the dogs. If you have any more questions about the dogs, I'd be delighted to try and answer them. But they're just a couple of lovely mongrels of whom we are more than inordinately fond. Yeah.
Should we tackle a question we have already sent in?
Okay, far away. What would you like me to do?
Love the Cotswolds. About how much are classic cottages selling for at this point in time?
Good question.
Gosh,
the sale of properties. I mean, we live in a part of the world where property is at an inflated price. There's no doubt about that. There are all kinds of good reasons for that. Partly it's our proximity to the great metropolitan centres like Birmingham and London in particular, which adds, because it's just commutable, it adds to the value of the properties in the area. It becomes an interesting question, this. You ask about classic cottages, and that's what everybody wants. They want some great stone-built 17th century cottage. This is an English phenomenon, you know. We're very unlike the rest of Europe. If you go to Italy, the farmers who live in the glorious hilltop farmhouses on tops of these hills in Tuscany are desperate to get out of them. They want to move down into the valleys where modern houses have been built, where you can live in a place that is insulated and easy to heat, cheap to run, and doesn't fall apart every 5 minutes. In England, not so much. People want to live in these ancient houses. Great beauty, of course, but they are deeply impractical and therefore very expensive to run. Now, the weird thing about this is that it means that the people attracted to them tend to be people with wealth, very often with second houses, but also with money to buy and then to look after these lovely medieval cottages. And I'm afraid that demand makes them expensive. So we're looking at £450,000 to £500,000 for a 2-bedroomed cottage of some kind of old origin in villages like Painswick or Winchcombe. And that is roughly the nature of things. If you get out into the villages in the valleys and so on, it goes up a little. And, you're looking at £500,000 really for even anything. And so that is absurd. I mean, I don't think there's any getting away from it. That is ridiculous. And it definitely prices out the children of people who've lived in this part of the world for a very long time. I'm not entirely certain that's a bad thing, because I have a lot of experience of living in these ancient houses, and the money drain is unbelievable. Something goes wrong every 5 minutes, and then you turn on the heating in this time of the year, and suddenly you're ruined. And to be honest with you, I now live in a house that was built in the late 1990s, and it's expensive enough, but I know perfectly well that in these old houses, it's much worse. Anyway, it's a complicated subject, but that is roughly the answer. You're looking at £500,000 if you want to buy a small cottage in one of the lovely villages of the Cotswolds. I wish you luck. I hope you're rich enough.
Well, we'll segue that to a question from your son, I believe.
Which young
is your
Jake.
Favorite Cotswold village and why? So where would you live in the Cotswolds?
Right, yes, I think that you may have an ulterior motive, Jake. It's lovely to see you. This is my dear son, Jake, who actually, it's very flattering, but I'm sure not for the reasons that would appear. He's recently moved into the village in which I live, which is wonderful. It's lovely to have him around with his lovely new partner, Emma, and they've got a lovely house here. Right, what is my favorite village in the Cotswolds? I better say, for the sake of politic, that where I live in Bampton is one of my favorite places. If I didn't say that, I'd get into trouble. But I think if I were going to move, I'd look at the Western Escarpment. I have to say that there is something breathtakingly beautiful about the way in which the Cotswold Hills drop extremely suddenly and steeply into the Severn Valley on the western side. This is Widget barking. He's come to. I told you he'd come and interrupt. Of the Cotswolds, and those villages of Winchcombe and Painswick and various others. But I won't list the small ones. But those two towns are very attractive to me. They are beautiful. They're full of fascinating history. And I suppose if I were, and the chances are very remote indeed, if I'm honest, but if I were looking, I think that's probably where I'd go. But the thing is to bear in mind about the Cotswolds, it's a big place and there are lots of alternatives, and there are places like Broadway. What I would avoid, though, I think, just as a small tip, if you're really looking for a house in this part of the world, what I would have done, I know that Jake isn't, so it's, on the other hand, if one of you might be, is I would try and avoid the really famous towns like Morton-in-Marsh and Broadway and so forth. Bybury, they are beautiful. There's no accident that they're world famous, but it means that your life is very different from normal life. You will be swamped by tourists. You will be constantly making sure you lock your front door in case when you come home from buying the newspaper, someone's sitting around your kitchen table having a cup of coffee from your kitchen. It happens all the time. It's a funny old world, this, living in a very, very famous place. We need to remember, ladies and gentlemen, not to get stroppy about it, because we've all been doing this to villages in Italy for all our lives. We must remember that, rubbernecking is part of the game. But just if you want to live in a place like that, you need to know what you're letting yourself in for. Otherwise, there you go. I think the Western Escarpment is my thing. I
agree.
There you are, Russ. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm not sure either of us really knew very well. Tell you what, they wanted to say their bit. You've heard them. They have a limited vocabulary, our dogs. But I think, having heard us both speak, I think they thought there was someone at the door. Oh, never mind. Be quiet, both of you. Right, there we go. Where do we go next?
Next question. Well, do you both have a favourite village? I think, you've covered that.
Yeah, okay.
Any famous people from the Cotswolds? Are any famous people from the Cotswolds that we know? I suppose.
There are lots. There are lots of famous people in the Cotswolds. I mean, right now, of course, the Cotswolds is home to some extremely high-profile people like the Beckhams, and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting this actually, because the Cotswolds, as we have discovered while traveling around it over the last 5 or 6 years, has remained very largely unchanged by any major kind of cataclysmic kind of developments of any kind until quite recently, when a new type of interest has been shown in this beautiful countryside. And that is the interest of the wealthy Londoners. It was inevitable, and I don't think any of us who live in the Cotswolds is surprised by this. But it was spotted, of course, by the extremely clever and very enlightened commercial people who saw that this was an inevitability. There's a wonderful man called Nick Jones, who is a neighbor of mine and a lovely fella who started a company called Soho House, which is world renowned. Of course, it has outlets all over the world and is a phenomenally successful business. But he has a place called the Soho Farmhouse in the center of the Cotswolds. There's no denying that has changed things. It is a new way of exploiting this part of the world. For me, to be honest, it's a little over manicured. And I don't want to be rude about this because it brings stuff to the, in the same way that Jeremy Clarkson, who many of you will have, he's a world famous guy who did that.
Clarkson's Farm.
Clarkson's Farm is and a motor car show, called Top Gear.
The Grand Tour.
Just shows how hopeless I am about these things. But he's been having very public battles with the authorities about his farm shop and so on. It's a whole new kind of Cotswold, and it has enormous value, frankly, to the Cotswold economy, and there's no getting away from that. We know that is to be the case, but old fuddy-duddies like me get a little twitchy about how, the sides of the road suddenly are devoid of cow parsley. The buttercups don't come up any longer. Everything's mowed to an nth degree, and it's all a little bit weird. But it's a big part of the Cotswolds now, and we need to watch it with interest.
Another one. How did you decide to showcase the Cotswolds as opposed to other areas of the UK?
And Ross will know perfectly well.
Luck.
It was luck and expediency. The truth is that, Ross and I were working together in a television channel, local television channel. I was doing a food and drink show, live food and drink show, talk show thing. And Ross was one of the producers. And this thing had come to an end. Some people know this story, but it came to an end, a sort of natural end, this thing. And as I was leaving the building, just on the last day, Ross came up to me and said, have you ever thought of doing a YouTube channel? And I, to be honest, I'm ashamed to have to admit it, I had no idea what YouTube was. So I asked him the question and he explained to me what it was all about. And then we started doing a food and drink show. We thought, why not? This is what we've been doing before. That was an error because we discovered that YouTube was completely stuffed with brilliant chefs and people doing great YouTube channels on food and drink. And we had very little more to offer, really. So we were searching around, and we were living on the side of the Cotswolds. Ross slightly less so than I, but I was certainly living right on the edge of the Cotswolds. It was a part of the world that I'd known all my life. I used to travel it on the back of my brother's scooter when I was a teenager, and he was a teenager too. I think it was the late teens, visiting medieval churches and stuff. So it was very deep in my heart. And at that moment, searching around in my books, I discovered a book that had been given to me by my son, who you met earlier on, called The Highways and Byways in Oxford, the Cotswolds. We've mentioned this to you before. We're just producing our edition of this book. He'd given it to me some years beforehand, and it sort of rang all the bells. It clearly was a perfect template for a lovely, interesting YouTube channel. That's where it started. And to be honest with you, for years, we didn't expect it very much of it. We did it because it was just fun to do. To a degree, Ross won't mind me saying so, but to a degree, he was learning his trade and his craft. And we found this wonderful vehicle, which gave us an enormous amount of fun. to have a lovely time. But Evans solidified it. And then one day, for reasons we find quite hard to identify, our viewing figures started going through the roof, and they have done so ever since. And it's been fantastic. And now it's got to the stage, frankly, where the Cotswolds have become so ingrained in us that we love it, and we know that there's an almost unlimited number of lovely villages for us to visit, and indeed certainly wonderful houses and places like that. So we've no restrictions on how long this could go on for. And so it's we had to make the decision of whether we'd actually take it seriously now that we've suddenly got such a wonderful audience like you guys, or perhaps draw it to a close where Ross would sort of go off and become I don't know, work for MGM or somewhere. But I've managed to persuade him not to for the moment anyway. And we're going to go on doing wonderful Cotswold stuff for the foreseeable future, I think.
Yeah, I think we've both enjoyed a lot of this over the years.
It's been enormous fun. I mean, it is. I don't know about you, but I've spent quite a lot of my time looking at churches and old buildings. But having spent this last 5 years doing it in such detail, I look at places completely differently now.
Yes, 100%.
You walk in, you look for different things, you are astonished by detail. It is enormous fun, all of this. It really is. And we are surrounded by these extraordinary hidden, I keep using the word gems. It's because I'm full of cliche. You have to forgive that, but there you go. It's an amazing part of the world to travel.
It is, yeah. I can't think of anywhere better. But yeah, no, I think you've answered that very well. How long does it take to film an episode, and how much research is done beforehand?
Okay. Well, now I know what I should say, which is that we research really, really well.
Very professional.
Before anything goes on. We have it all storyboarded. We know exactly what we're looking for. And we go in, and it takes no time at all because we know exactly what we're after. It's just not like that at all. What happens, mind you, having said that, it may have to be in the future, but it isn't at the moment. We ring each other up. Looks like a sunny day next Wednesday. Why don't we go and do a bit of filming? Okay, where should we go? Well, we'll make a few notes and check out a few things. Evans guides us, of course. We'll pick a couple of villages. We'll say we'll end up there. We arrive. We know a little because Evans has tipped us off a little bit about the sort of place we're looking at, but very little generally. And then we find, to our astonishment, something extraordinary. Almost always there'll be anything from a beautiful village green or an amazing mural in the church or whatever, or a lovely manor house we didn't know existed, or one of these things. And we'll film it. We make sure we get the details of things. I usually know roughly what's inside the church so we don't miss anything. Ross then puts together the footage, always including, whenever he possibly can, some drone footage, because the drone footage is kind of one of our signatures. He was really one of the very earliest adopters of this technology. And, when we started this thing, he had a drone. It was a lovely machine, but it looks a little clumsy by comparison with modern ones, but it was an amazing piece of kit. And it was really early on. It was before even, the BBC had started using them in every news report and stuff, which they do now. So it's very much part of our lives. So a good bit of drone footage. And then I go home and I dig out the books and I start researching the place proper. And almost always I find a story that I wish I'd known about before I went. So, for example, I discovered that, a particular Blockley, which will probably come up later in this program, was the great center of the silk trade. Well, I didn't know that. And if we'd filmed there, I wouldn't have known. And then we might well have missed filming the silk mills, and it's those sorts of silly things keep happening to us, partly because we don't quite do it professionally. But bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, the point about this show is that it's not financially backed by anybody. It's just done by us. And it's so we do it because we can fit it in and we do it the way we can. Things may change a little bit over the next few months, but that's how we do it right now. The reason, incidentally, we're going to change is not because we want to change our way of going about things, but if we're filming people's houses with them and interviewing them, it has to be better prepared, and we have to write scripts. They need to know what we're going to ask them and so forth. So things will change, and I'll tell you a little bit about that program later.
That's good. Very good. Well, keeping on the Evans theme there, how long did it take to write and publish your wonderful book? It's very nice of you to say wonderful.
Glad you like it. Well, we, of course, written early in 1905. What we did was to take the copy, to relay it out. I say we. I absolutely put this firmly and strongly in Ross's lap. He's done this thing of poring over this document. It's huge, and it's, you know, a long thing. There it is. That's the paperback version, and it's so resetting it and putting it into shape, making sure that there were no mistakes or excuse we could possibly manage, reproofing it, repunctuating it, and in all kinds of ways changing it has taken us quite a long time. I mean, it's taken us a year, say, of quite a lot of hard work. During that time, I've read it aloud, so it's available in audiobook as well. And that was exciting. And you told me how many hours it was. How many hours?
I think the book in total is, I think it's 13 and a half hours.
13
so
and a half
that
hours.
was you sat there for 13 and a half hours in your recording box.
Yeah. I have a funny recording box. This is, you said you're in my home at the moment, but in the little room behind me here, I have a little study. And Ross made me a recording box. It's just a large cardboard box lined with that funny spiky tank trap kind of rubber stuff, and it deadens the sound around it and so on. So I have my head buried in this thing talking into this microphone. There you are, 13 and a half hours of reading. Within it, there'll be moments when you will get infuriated by my pronunciations and lack of clarity, I'm sure, but I've done my best. I hope it works well. I think it would. I think it does. I think it sounds good. Although I suppose I probably should admit that I've not listened to it all the way through. So, yeah, if you find things, let me know.
Well, I've listened to it all the way
You've
through,
listened
so
to it all the way
hopefully
through.
any mistakes I've ironed out. But
Yeah.
I do have the preface to camera that we filmed on location in the Cotswolds
okay.
that we can show people.
Brilliant.
So I will cue that up now, and for the next couple of minutes, enjoy this.
Have a nice
This
time.
is a very special day for us because 4 years ago, when we decided that the Cotswolds were going to be our subject for our YouTube channel, Ross and I searched around in our books to find interesting volumes that might help us on our way. And I discovered in my library a book called The Highways and Byways in Oxford and the Cotswolds by Herbert Evans, about which you've heard a great deal over the last 4 years because we've fundamentally been following him. It was given to me by my son as a birthday present several years before this, so entirely coincidentally, and he wishes me an interesting read and a lovely birthday. Well, in fact, this book has turned out to be a much greater present than that. Our new edition is now out. It's extremely exciting. It comes in paperback and hardback. This is the paperback proof edition. I hope you'll enjoy it, and I hope you'll like to buy it. Preface and introduction to an audiobook, Highways and Byways in Oxford and the Cotswolds by Herbert Evans, originally published in 1905. Read by me, Robin Shuckburgh, the Cotswold Explorer, January 2023. This is not another book about Oxford, of the making of which, as a recent reviewer reminds us, there is no end. It is only a summer excursion into the hill country that lies to the north and west, towards the broad vale of the Severn and Avon. But of Oxford and its colleges, our wayfarer is again and again reminded in the course of his wanderings. Oxford is at once his starting point and the goal of his returning footsteps. Accordingly, in the opening chapter, he takes a preliminary tour through the city. The district explored is that which lies between the Cherwell on the east and the fringe of the Cotswolds on the west. In other words, the northern half of the basin of the Upper Thames. This is a large area, and one which the present volume does not attempt to exhaust. What is here set down is the outcome of individual tastes and individual impressions, and as such, it is offered to the reader. I have written of those places and those passages in their history which interested me. If they also interest him, my purpose will have been fulfilled. It's finally here. Highways and Byways in Oxford and the Cotswolds by Herbert Evans is available now as an audiobook, in paperback, and for Amazon and Kindle. Read by me, Robin Shuckburgh, viewers of the channel will know that this has been our indispensable guide for many of our Cotswold films. Escape to the early 20th century and follow Evans as he cycles from Oxford all the way through famous hotspots and hidden gems alike.
We're back.
Well, there you go. That gives you the background of the book. We're very excited about it. I hope you like it. It's been an great, well, it's been fun for me to leave him to do all the work, putting it all together.
I've enjoyed it. I was the first to listen to your voice.
Yes,
delivering all those nice stories from days gone by.
Yeah.
No, it's good. We have a pre-written question, which is from Lynn 698. So hopefully they're watching. But I love your channel, Robin. I would like to know more about the annual fairs for the area and the routes from one fair to the next that travellers might take. My ancestors were cork hawkers. How
amazing. Well, that's very exciting. And my expertise about the fairs is not brilliant, actually. What's intriguing is that there are lots of markets still in the Cotswolds, some of them weekly. In fact, you can find them. There's on cotswolds.org, which is a website all about it's actually run largely by the local councils, but it gives you, they have a market map, timetable throughout the year. But the markets you're talking about are different. And these are the great travelers, the great tradition of travelers markets throughout the Cotswolds. The largest of them by a country mile is Stowe. Now, Stowe Market has been famous for centuries. It's a horse trading market. Has been, because Stowe sits on this hill, rather beautifully placed at the sort of junction of all the roads from the eastern end of England, London and all that sort of stuff. Also the north, so Birmingham and beyond, and then the West Country. Stowe sits on that kind of crossroads and has always been a thriving market as a result. The town itself, in fact, grew up in the nature of its architecture, partly because of the market. In fact, if you go and sit in the town square in Stowe, you'll notice that there are dozens of little slightly bent, narrow streets that go off these in every direction. These were built in order to control the flow of the livestock that came into that village, into the square to be sold. You could count them in and then count them out again because of these narrow little streets. And so the whole town is built like a market. And it has been that way ever since. It was, I think, certainly sometime in the 15th century, the markets were allocated to Stowe, two, one in October and one in May. The October one is quite soon. It's usually in the closest to, I think, the 14th of the month. So it should be soon. And it has thrived for years, this market. And it is one of the most exciting of the traditional travelers markets. It's a horse trading market. Horses come from miles around to be traded. So the place is full of carts being drawn by ponies and stuff, and they race them up and down the road. And it's a wonderful, wonderful, lively and exciting time. But, ladies and gentlemen, I have not heard yet about what's happening this year. COVID, as it won't surprise you to know, has caused havoc with the Stowe fairs. I can't, at the drop of a, Ross has just been looking, and I've had a little look earlier on, and I can't find any indication that this fair is going to happen as it should in about 3 weeks' time. Now, I'm going to carry on trying to find out, and if we do, we'll find ways to communicate this with you. But it is, you purposefully mentioned that this is the kind of market you're looking at. There are few of them now, very few of them. but Stowe is very definitely one that still exists and is really exciting phenomenon. I hope it's going to happen again this year. It should. We'll wait and see. Bampton, just to give it a mention, just so as you know, the end of May bank holidays and also, later in the year, we have Morris dancing festivals here. You keep an eye on Bampton because we're a pretty good old-fashioned kind of entertainment kind of place. We used to have a huge horse fair here in the olden days, but that stopped sometime in the 1930s. So we haven't had one since. So, but we do have this lovely Morris dancing fair every year, which I hope you will come and join us in next year.
Very well answered. Very, very comprehensive. Nice to get lots of people commenting on the stream as well.
That's nice. That's good to hear.
Nice to see.
Well, I hope if there's any more information, if anybody has any more information about Stowe Fair, do let me know. That we will try and keep an eye out and see your comments. And if you know what's happening, please do tell me, because it would be lovely to be able to say something before the end of the thing.
Yes. Yeah. Another question that someone sent in from Ellie Matthews. Hi, Robin. I'm visiting England this year and can only spend about 3 days in the Cotswolds. I really don't like heavy touristy places and prefer to see the real England. Where are your 3 most hidden gems in the Cotswolds? Thank you so much for the channel.
Well, that's very kind. Okay, well, now that's a very good point. I think most people have quite a limited amount of time to come and visit this part of the world. So it's tricky. Now, you don't want touristy places. I think I'm going to lead you again towards the Western Escarpment. I'm going to suggest Winchcombe. Winchcombe is a beautiful town itself, but it has the massive advantage of Sudeley Castle, which is one of the greatest of all the privately owned homes in the county. You can see it from all kinds of angles, but there's a rather wonderful one on the side of the hill. You take a little lane up on the hill, you look down on the castle, and it's a fabulous view. The town itself is lovely, ancient, full of lovely shops and things, a very good bookshop there. I think that's a lovely town to start with, actually. But while you're there, have a little look for the valley through which, look for places, various villages, Winston and the Duntersbournes. Now, it's not too far away from there. They're so pretty, these villages. Their churches are undisturbed and ancient and beautiful. And there's a sort of atmosphere of these wonderful little Cotswoldy villages in the valleys, the steep valleys of that escarpment. That valley is worth it. If you're limited in your time, it's definitely worth a visit. I think Russ will agree with me on this, because we loved it, didn't we? They were
yes.
just beautiful, those little villages. So I think that's where I would suggest you look. You can drop, Painswick will come into the equation. You can look at various other places there, but those key things, start with the Winchcombe experience and then look for the Duntersbourne Valley. You won't, the modern technology will lead you there, so you'll be able to find it. I hope that'll be enjoyable. Let me know if you have a nice time.
Good villages. I would say Cirencester is a good around that. It's obviously the valley running out of Cirencester, the Duntersbournes.
Cirencester is lovely, isn't it? And itself, of course, the great Roman centre of the city, of the area. And yeah, Cirencester is lovely. And yes, you're right. Of course, the Duntersbournes run almost straight out of there, going north.
I don't know if you remember the East Leeches,
I do.
East Leech Martin and East Leech Turville. I would say that I would give those a special mention.
Gosh,
just from me personally.
What a good idea. Yes, they were lovely. It was quite a while back. What a good memory you've got. They are rather lovely. They sit either side of a river with 2 separate churches, and they're rather beautiful. Yes, that's definitely worth a try. Good call.
Yeah. Okay, another question here. I'd like to know what you consider to be the best Neolithic sites in the Cotswolds. We haven't done a lot of them, have we? But there's a couple.
Well, we really have done quite a few. I mean, the thing is that we could, if we wanted to, concentrate on these extraordinary stone circles and stuff, and these amazing barrows, burial grounds and things that there are around. There are lots and lots and lots of them. We decided quite early on not to, partly not to dilute the interest in what we were doing. So our expertise is not great. Everybody should look at the Rollright stones, read the stories. They're fun, and try to see if you can count the stones, get the numbers right, and all that sort of stuff. Everybody should see that. have a look at the villages beneath them, because there are wonderful traditions of witch hunting and things that go on in the villages below these the rollright stones. So build your story by visiting the villages surrounding them. That is definitely worth doing. They crop up everywhere, though, these things, and where our expertise is not great. Belas Knap, I mention now. Belas Knap is just outside Winchcombe, and Belas Knap is a burial ground, a Neolithic, ancient burial ground, on the top of a hill above Winchcombe. And if you decide to go and visit that, and it is wonderful. I haven't been there for 40 years, so because I'm so old, I was too lazy to climb the hill.
It's steep.
It's very steep. Ross climbed, but I didn't. But during the course of that journey, you will get this breathtaking view from above of the castle. And honestly, that is definitely worth going to look at. So you've got these double whammy, this extraordinary Neolithic burial ground and Sudeley Castle beneath you. So that's a trip worth making.
Well, I can lead this into, speaking of Belas Knap, someone has just asked, BB, which is your favourite, scariest story of the Cotswolds? Now, when I went to film up at Belas Knap for a ghost story, and it was about spooky monks and someone looking out at the view and the view changing as if they were looking back hundreds of years time. But I don't know if from any of our ghost stories, if you can, off the top of your head, remember anything scary. But I would say Belas Knap was quite a spooky. I was there at sort of sunset as well, so it was very atmospheric. But.
Well, and I'd left you on your own, Ross. That's the thing, because I wasn't going to climb that hill. But well, scary stories. I quite like the ones close to home, I have to admit. I think the great Burford story of the terrorizing of the village by the family who lived in the old priory in those days, locked up at the Tanfields, locked in a bottle and thrown into the river and buried in the sand and so in the mud beneath, and supposedly prepared any second now to reappear and haunt the village again. That seems pretty scary. Pretty relevant too, actually, because the priory, this ancient ruin that has been a problem for years in Burford, has recently been entirely restored in the most wonderful way. And it's really quite exciting. A man called Matthew Freud, who is a famous man, a public relations man, lives there now, and it's we haven't seen it yet, but I'm hoping to do so at some stage or another. It's very exciting, but that's where the family who spooked the entire town of Burford lived, and so if they escape from their bottle, heaven alone knows what will happen to Mr. Freud's new house. What
new opportunities are moving forward in 2024? Well, we've spoken already a little bit about I guess maybe we could start talking about the Country Homes series now that we're planning a little bit more.
Let's do that thing. House. Yes. The plan, the thing is, we know that there is a finite number, let's put it like that, of Cotswold gems. We can go on doing this for a long time, but somehow or other, we're going to start running a little dry. So we thought, what was the natural progression? And it seemed to us that if we were confident enough about ourselves, that we could start to make really interesting documentary films, perhaps half an hour long, maybe a little more, about the great, great houses of this part of the world. So we started thinking about that last year, and we realized that we were becoming confident enough to do it, which could be terribly misguided, but there you go. And so we started approaching one or two people who either live in or own or have owned these houses. And we were amazingly flattered to discover that they were very enthusiastic on the whole about us doing these films. So we're going to do it. It takes more preparation than we're used to, as I've already mentioned earlier on. But we're going to start very, very, very high up the scale. We're going to start with the glorious house of Stanway House, which is a sort of Elizabethan Jacobean house. It's a most extraordinary place. It's an astonishing village, actually, almost completely unspoiled, all down to the family who live there, who have lived there. Certainly in that area, they've lived since pre-Norman times. This is a family descended from, the sort of, came over with Edward the Confessor, so the Emperor Charlemagne, for crying out loud, this is an unbelievably ancient family, still living in this house. And it's really very exciting. That's going to be our first. They've got a wonderful ancient mill, which we're also going to film and show how it works. And so that is going to be the first of our films. Now, these are not going to sort of appear once a month in the way that our other stuff does. That will continue, of course. We're going to go on making lovely gem films and so often tell you all about the little ins and outs of the Cotswolds. But this series, I hope, will produce by the end, with the help of the National Trust, who've also agreed to talk to us about some of their houses that we can film. We're going to make what I think will be a really useful selection of films about some of the great houses of the area. I'm very much looking forward to it and determined to stay fit and healthy in order to make it happen.
You say about the National Trust there, someone's saying you should go around Chastleton House.
Chastleton's a perfect example.
That's a National Trust one, isn't it?
Yeah,
we can certainly try our best.
We will. I'm completely confident that once this gets going, that actually everybody will want to, anybody who has any commercial interest in people coming to their houses, of which not everybody does, but most of them do, and certainly the National Trust ones do. I'm absolutely firmly confident that they will be only too pleased for us to do these things. We're quite unobtrusive as filmmakers. We don't come with caravans and limousines. We just pitch up, the two of us and a couple of dogs, and we can leave the dogs behind if we have to. Well, no, we can't, because I'll get into trouble if we do.
The stars of the show.
Absolutely.
I do have a clip from Stanway House of you reading a little bit of Evans outside brilliant. Stanway, and a clip from our previous Stanway film. So just to give people a taste of what that might look like, here we go.
Go for it.
The estates owned by the great Mercian monasteries in the Cotswolds were enormous. As Broadway belonged to Pershaw, Buckland to Gloucester, and Stanton to Winchcombe, so Stanway belonged to Tewkesbury, and here its abbots had a country house. No situation within such easy distance could have been better chosen. Tewkesbury lies low in the valley, and in wintertime was much exposed to fogs and floods. Stanway is from 200 to 300 feet higher, and could bid defiance to the waters, while at the same time it's sheltered from the north and east by the steep background of hill that rises immediately behind the village. For recreation, too, there was the hunting of the stag, which then, and much later, was as wild on these hills as it is on Exmoor today. Indeed, throughout the country, it was only the clearing of forests, the progress of enclosures, and the improvement in farming and the growth of population which finally confined this noble animal to parks and put the fox in its place as the beast of the chase. At the dissolution, the manor was granted to the Tracys of Toddington, and from them in 1771 it passed by marriage to the family of the Earl of Weems. Stanway House, the residence of Lord Elcho, is a splendid Jacobean mansion built by the Tracy of the day.
The Tracy family built this wonderful Jacobean mansion over generations. In 1620, Richard Tracy built the gatehouse outside which Ross and I found ourselves, frankly, transfixed. The Weems family still own this extraordinary place. They're a noble Scottish family and own several other great houses in Britain, but it is enormously to their credit that they've kept this exceptional place pretty much as it was since the start. Just the church, the huge and beautiful Jacobean house with its superb gatehouse, a few cottages and barns all faced in a wonderful golden ashlar stone, and a recently restored working watermill is pretty much all the village consists of. Restored and working since 2009, this mill produces fantastic stone-ground bread flour. We were lucky enough to arrive on a day when the mill was working, and the lovely millers were generous enough to sell me a bag of flour for the slightly measly £2 I had in my pocket. A bag is usually a few pence more than that, but I can tell you from experience that a loaf made 50-50 wholemeal and strong white flour produces spectacularly tasty bread. I think the message from Stanway is that if you leave this wonderful heritage of ours alone, protect it from the ravages of the recent centuries, maintain its solidly built infrastructure, it rewards you with a sense of peace and warm-heartedness that is simply unique and staggeringly valuable.
It is such a wonderful place. We're going to have a lot of fun making a film about that house.
Yes. Yeah, I remember the first time ever visiting there. I stood outside the gatehouse, just kind of, slightly in awe.
It is incredible. And Lord Williams has been very kind to us and is going to talk to us, tell us about his history of his family and all that kind of stuff. So we're looking forward to that very much.
You mentioned in that film a little bit about developers being careful in the Cotswolds and how we sort of manage that. So we have a question here. Has progress via developers come to town in the gorgeous and unspoiled lands of the Cotswolds? I admire the historical and picturesque beauty of land and structures there daily through the lens of those that live there. It breaks my heart that the possibility of the blight of America could very well bring its destruction there too in the name of progress. It's quite a slightly political one here. I thought I would see if I could catch you out.
I should be cautious. It is actually a very interesting question, this. And the answer is that, yes, the threat of developers is always there. And it would be foolish of me to try and pretend that I don't get upset about it myself. I worry about the way in which our drive to build many or more houses for people to live in seems to be driving us to extending the villages of the Cotswolds without real due attention to improving infrastructure and services and schools and so forth. There is an element of chaos, inevitably, I think, about the way in which 21st century housing development carries on. And it is a constant threat to the very beauty of the place that we all love so much. It's a problem, though, because, as I think I've already mentioned today, the old village houses that exist in these little villages all over the Cotswolds are now very expensive to live in, both to buy and to run. And so they're lived in mainly by either people who don't spend their lives in the villages but work elsewhere, sometimes the second homes that they are, in many cases, actually, in the villages of Oxfordshire. And the pricing has meant, of those places, has meant that the local families, I mean, who've been working there is whatever they might be, shopkeepers or farmers or whatever, over the centuries, are priced completely out of the market unless you build for them houses that they can afford to live in and run. So it's not as simple as it sounds. The battle, I think, is probably never ending, because the truth is that if you let it go and don't fight the battle, the gap between a place, for example, just as an example, like the Slad Valley, where Laurie Lee is buried, and it's one of the most beautiful valleys in the whole thing, and Stroud, which is just down at the bottom of the valley, that gap is so narrow that it could be covered in a flash, with hundreds, if not thousands, of houses, unless you fight the battle and make sure it doesn't happen. So the struggle continues. The most important thing, it seems to me, however, is that some buildings should be allowed in order to maintain the increasing numbers of people who want to live here and need to be able to afford to do so, because that's how communities keep alive and so forth. But that the infrastructure should be given a massive priority. Don't pollute the rivers because your sewage systems aren't up to the developments. Don't make the schools inoperable because there are too many children, or classes get too big, or there aren't enough classrooms and so forth. Make sure that the infrastructure in general, bus services, all this kind of stuff, trains even, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? There's an invention, I don't know about anybody born after the 1960s in the Cotswolds won't know what these things are, but they're trains. They run on rails. They were amazing. They were all over the Cotswolds for ages, running villages one to another, communicating, all scrapped in the 1960s. I only wish we had them back. Anyway, that's a sort of little rant. But I think on the whole, we are going to need to build places for people to live. We really are. And they're going to have to be of the modern kind, which is cheap to live in and well insulated. And for heaven's sake, probably heat pumps and stuff. You know, there's a whole new world we have to cater for. But watch the infrastructure, because it's so easy to destroy the comfortable community that exists in these villages by overloading the infrastructure and making it impossible for people to lead a decent village community life. And that's destructive. That's my point. I do.
Very well put, I
Okay.
think. Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. This is from Mark Fisher, and this is the Rod Martin question. If you're,
yes.
So my earliest
Wonderful,
American
Martin.
ancestors came to Massachusetts in 1664. From what I understand, was a village in the Cotswolds called Rod Martin. Have you ever heard of it, and does it still exist?
I'm just so glad you asked this, because it's a wonderful illustration of how things change. And apropos of what we've just been saying about new houses, it makes for a really interesting story. Rod Martin is quite a well-known village, actually. It still certainly exists. At the time your ancestors left, it will have been a very small village indeed. A beautiful church, probably a little vicarage. In fact, certainly a little vicarage. A few cottages. It would have been a largely agricultural community. And there was no great manor house. There was, in the other sense, a manor. In other words, it was looked after by one of the big religious institutions. But it was a tiny place. And if they came from that village, your ancestors would, hardly any of their family would ever have been more than half a mile from that village. They would have lived there probably for quite a long time, and their entire world would have revolved around this tiny community. That is how it was. Now, oddly, and almost uniquely, at the beginning of the the end of the 19th century, just before the beginning of the 20th century, the manor was given to, I'm going to remember their family, a family called Biddulph. Now, the Biddulphs were enormous fans of William Morris and his arts and crafts movement. They were also extremely wealthy. So they decided to build a manor house, a full-scale Cotswold manor house, a great big place. But they were going to build it to all the arts and crafts rules. That meant natural materials from the region, from the immediate vicinity, stone quarried from down the road, great timbers cut from the forests around, and then not allowed to be sawn in steam-powered saws or anything like that. Not allowed. They had to be trimmed and cut in proper old bodger ditches. Now, a bodger ditch is where you dig a hole in the ground, you stretch the log over the top of it, and you hack away at it with your primitive tools to shape it from underneath. It's how the bodgers used to make furniture and so forth. And every beam in this house is made in that way. It was an extraordinary exercise and attention to detail. It cost a fortune, of course, but they were wealthy enough to do it. And this house is built, so now finished in the early 20th century. It's, to some people, it's a kind of pastiche, a sort of terrible imitation. To me, it's a classic and wonderful example of the wonderful William Morris arts and crafts movement. And it's a house well worth seeing. It's open once in a while, not all the time by any means. It's still lived in by the Biddulph family. And they obviously adore the house. The garden is spectacularly beautiful. And has been, built from scratch. This is the whole thing built from scratch in the last 100 years. It's a very, very exciting place, really. But it is unique. I mean, there are no, as far as I'm aware, there are no other houses of this kind, certainly not on this scale, that have been built. And in your ancestors' time, of course, it wasn't even a glint in anybody's eye. This is built in a place where there had been no great manor house before. You've reminded me of it, and I'm so thrilled you have, because I'm going to write to them now, and I'm going to ask whether we can do a film about it. I think they're exactly the sort of people who might be interested in doing it, because they like to open. I suspect it's mainly because they love sharing the beauty of their home, but there'll be maybe a little commercial motive to it. I doubt it, to be honest, but it's more likely to be that they just love showing it off. And for all the rest of us, it's wonderful to go and see. So watch this space. With a bit of luck and a following wind, we'll do a program about it. Anyway, so thank you for reminding me of Rodmartin. We haven't been there. There will come a time when we'll drop in, but it may be in a grand scale to look at this fabulous house.
I think that leads quite nicely into a couple of questions we've got about places we haven't been to. So I've got one, which is, have you or will you be showing Blockley? Now that's quite a famous one that we haven't yet been to. And someone else has asked this one, which is, I noticed that you guys don't do any villages around Bath other than Castle Combe. Just wondering if this is because a lot of people consider it not technically part of the Cotswolds, or is it just too far?
Right. Well, Blockley actually, yeah, very famous. Big filming base, actually. I mean, I think Father Brown was filmed there. That's right. So very well known, very pretty. It's one of the larger of the Cotswold villages. Why we haven't been there, heaven alone knows why. I do know that it's only mentioned in passing in Evans, and that may be why we didn't get to it. We will definitely end up going to Blockley at some stage or other. It's a lovely place, actually. And yeah, I've driven through it many times, and we will definitely go there. I'm glad you took this off, is what I'm saying. It'll become one of our Cotswold gems in the near future. Yes. Now, yeah, right. So the other half is Bath and all, and that far. We just haven't quite got that far south. The thing is, well, two things actually. Firstly, at the beginning, we thought we would probably stop once we got to sort of Tetbury-ish, and that we wouldn't go much further south than that. Castle Combe was impossible to resist, so we went to Castle Combe. But we've realized, as I think I may have made a passing mention of this earlier on, that we don't actually need to be hidebound by the area of special natural beauty that this place is. We can be quite flexible, and we can certainly go as far as the great limestone outcrop that all the buildings are made from go, and Bath is the sort of boundary. So we will look in detail at that part of the world. I have friends who live in that part of the world. I know some of them live in the villages around, and I know how beautiful it is. And it's geologically a little different, and it's quite exciting actually, because you know, the layout of the place is slightly different from the rest of the Cotswolds. So we'll have an enjoyable time there. We'll get there in the end, is the answer, but we've not yet gotten that far south.
Gizmo's here to say hello.
There he is.
If you can see him in the screen, and Widget saying hello as well.
Come here, boy. Yeah, he's not going to come here.
Can't not have the dogs involved. Got another good question here. Apart from the beautiful towns and villages, are the Cotswolds famous for anything else? So I don't know, something like the cheese rolling event comes to mind. But...
sorry, Gizmo's now complaining because yeah. Okay, here we are. We had to get the dogs up here somewhere. You see, they like one another. You can tell. Right. Yes, the Cotswolds are famous for many things, actually. I'm going to put this fellow down again. There are some wonderful, rather eccentric old English activities of that kind. The old Gloucester cheese rolling thing is one. The Dover Games is well known, and they take place out near Painswick. There are their most famous history is that of sheep farming. And the extraordinary churches that litter this part of the world are largely built on the money from the proceeds of that great industry, the sheep farming industry. And then later, the finished cloth, which became very famous worldwide. So that is sort of where its fame came from. There's a lot of, I think the vast majority of the tourism that comes through this part of the world is based around the beauty of the villages themselves. So you see these extraordinarily ancient, wonderful little cottagey villages, often with water running through them, and bridges and little things of that kind, which are just stunningly pretty, and it's very famous for that. it has been, of course, the centre of great industry, because not only are the quarries all over the place where the stone was dug out of the hills in order to build these wonderful places, including the cathedrals and the great abbeys and things that there were all over the place, but also ironstone. So there were great mining activity there was in the Cotswolds. And that's why the railways were built through the hills. So you've got these wonderful ancient, not ancient, but old railway routes that are no longer run, as we've mentioned, but you have the remnants of their viaducts and so forth running all over the place. And these were taking in and out the materials for mining. So that was active. There are places like Stonesfield, for example, where the entire village sits on a little crust and undermined entirely by the slate mines underneath them. These are rope, so it was famous. These are roof tiles, incidentally, sort of stone roof tiles, which are famous all over the Cotswolds. And they were mined there. It's a precarious place to live, Stonesfield. There, you could be sure your house isn't going to sink into a hole. And so there are other things it was famous for, but they are the main things. And nowadays, of course, it's just, bear in mind, incidentally, that it was always been beautiful. It's always been central. It's been very convenient since Roman times and before, even in Iron Age times. It's been a center of civilization. And the result is, of course, that huge and wonderful ecclesiastical buildings were built throughout the generations, right from the very beginning, along with Roman villas onwards. And some of them still exist. Some of them have been knocked down. But a lot of them are still around, and that, of course, is one of the great joys of this part of the country.
Very good. I think that covers that pretty well. Biome Labs, thanks you for answering the question. I was wondering if we could get a little map on the videos that show the location of each place. We did used to do that on some episodes.
Yeah,
we would put a map in. Perhaps we could reinstate that in some way, maybe in the Country Homes films, but we can look into that.
I think that's right. I will keep pressure on him.
But
because
otherwise,
we used to have a little rather wonderful. My little hat used to run around.
Yes, well, I think that was fun.
It was all good fun, and actually, it needs to be easy, because we must come clean and admit that our plans for the next year and a half are going to be quite time consuming for us, and Ross has to make a living, poor soul, and so we can't load him with too much of this. But if it turns out to be something we can slot in, I think it's a priority, actually. And I like the idea. Simple maps with some kind of pointer on it to show where we are and what we're doing is a good plan. And we will try and produce more. The other thing we're doing is we're developing, Ross will tell you more about this than I will really, but the website we're rebuilding now is going to make it easier to find specific information about specific places from our content on YouTube. YouTube don't make that kind of thing easy. So you can't go into YouTube and search for a village easily unless it's in the title and stuff. It makes life complicated for us. But the website will enable you to say, I'm going to such and such a village, let's see what the Cotswold Explorer has to be said about it. Now that, I hope, will be a major step forward, and it will help with the maps. We'll make sure the map's on there.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yes, the website will be much more comprehensive. There'll be a whole index of all the films we've done before. I know a few people have asked just generally over the years, where can we find all your films?
Yeah.
So our website will act much more as a hub of everything we do and everywhere in the Cotswolds. And we'll look at maybe getting some kind of map on there as well. If it's not in our videos, it might be there.
Yeah.
And that can be a good way to look around the Cotswolds.
And we might just simply nick the maps if it turns out to be too difficult to make our own.
Yes, exactly. There's Google Maps for a reason, and it works.
But I think this is important, and it's part of the reason we can continue doing what we're doing is that we know that this body of work that we're producing is going to be in a place which is easily navigable, which YouTube, as I say, is not great at, and on purpose, so it isn't supposed to be that. So it's a different kind of entertainment channel. But hopefully this will allow us to make it possible for you to look at indexes and stuff.
Yes. I have a more technical question as well while we're on this.
Go for it.
Which is, what camera does Ross use?
Oh, yeah. Well, I know all about. Oh, no, I better let him do that.
Well, I won't go on for too long about technicalities, but I use it's a Panasonic GH5S. It films in 4K. I used to use a Canon camera. And the drone is a Mavic Air 3. So if there's any technical people watching and you have an interest in cameras, that is what is being used to film the Cotswold Explorer. And I'll leave it at that without getting too.
No, you're not going to get into it.
Well, we have the Ronin as well, which is a handheld gimbal. Which is, if you're wondering how we get those smooth sort of soaring shots through the streets, we mount it on what's called a Ronin gimbal, and it goes
he
round.
sticks his head out of the top of the car with this thing, and I drive through the villages, and it's lovely and smooth and perfect. It's all because it's on this amazing, very clever piece of kit. He has a lot of this stuff. He's always been producing wonderful things of this kind. When we first started, I think your father, or possibly your grandfather, built for you a
track dolly. Yes, that's right. No, my granddad, who is sort of an engineer previously, yes, he built these, kind of very into railways. So he built me this amazing track dolly. I think we used it in one of the early Downton Abbey.
We did a panning shot across the church square in Bampton on it. I thought this was really taking us into the new generation of stuff. It was so impressive. But now, actually, frankly, on this gimbal thing, you can do it on your own.
And indeed on the drone as well. You get very smooth shots. So we always like trying to add new techniques to films wherever we can. So if people have any suggestions for films or things they'd like to see in future videos or
good call,
anything like that, feel free to leave a comment. Burning question, I'm sure, from quite a large chunk of our audience. Can we look forward to a Haunted Cotswolds episode for Halloween this year? I'll let you take that one.
Well, the simple answer is absolutely. Our plan is to film some lovely spooky stuff in the evenings over the next month. And Ross will tell you in a minute where we're going, because this is entirely, this is produced and largely written and everything perfectly, all by Ross. And all I do is sit there and go all gravel voiced and read things. But we're going to film all the way, I think, down from Edge Hill all the way down to Bath, aren't we? That's year, right. Over the next month. And yes, there will be a lovely spooky month's worth of stuff. And by the end of Halloween season, there will be another one of those nice long pieces that we've done 2 of already over the last couple of years. So no, we wouldn't let you down. And incidentally, I'm enjoying so much the reading of ghost stories that I'm trying to find a way to slot in a ghost story at least once a month, just for the fun of it, which I might just read to camera in my own home, because I'm having such fun finding glorious, particularly Victorian ghost stories. It was a great fashion in the time of the Victorian times. They're free of copyright, so it allows me to read them to you all. And I shall be doing a little bit of that as well.
Very good. Yes, Halloween well covered. Well, to that end, we actually have a preview of stuff we've already shot from our Halloween special. We've already gone out and filmed some bits and pieces. So without further ado,
this is exciting.
We'll show this off to you before anyone else gets to see it.
The beautiful village of Astle has a particularly strange story involving the ghost of a hitchhiker. 2 separate accounts detail 2 people that met a gypsy-like girl on the road near Astle Manor. On a dark October evening, a driver passing through the village spotted a girl with dark shoulder-length hair, olive skin, and a gypsy-like appearance, who flagged him down, climbed into the passenger seat, and sat in silence. The driver told of how the girl was soaked through, and when he asked her if she was all right, she replied, "It's too late, he's gone," before vanishing before the driver's eyes. On the second occasion, on an afternoon in March, when a young mother was on her way to collect her son from school, she saw a young girl trying to flag her down. She stopped and let her in. As the young, drenched girl climbed in, she said, "You got my message then?" The driver asked what the girl meant, and she answered, "The water, the river, he's gone," and again vanished. No one seems to have found any explanation for these peculiar encounters. nobody has managed to connect the phenomena to any real-world events. The girl's soaked condition and her mention of the river could indicate some tragedy at the nearby River Windrush, but there is no further information to go on. Continuing south, the road between Charlbury and Finstock is said to be haunted by a phantom coach and four. Usually, only the sounds of horses' hooves and clattering wheels can be heard, roughly following the route of the B4022. It sometimes deviates from the road, probably because modern alterations have changed the road's course over the years. On one occasion, a party from Charlbury, attempting to get to the bottom of this phenomenon, decided to block the ghostly coach by barricading the road. They waited for some time before the unmistakable cacophony of the coach approached, but they saw nothing. To their astonishment, they heard the coach stop abruptly, pause briefly as if in consideration, and then they heard the sound of it turning around and setting off back for Charlbury.
Well, that was a little sneak preview of what's to come. Just to give a plug to the sister channel, Horrific Tales and Ghostly Trails. Someone has, I can't actually find the comment in the feed now, but somebody, when can we expect more haunted places? Your voice is just historic and I never miss an episode, poem or story.
You are kind.
Well, there is more stuff going up on Horrific Tales and Ghostly Trails, which is a sister channel covering just that kind of thing. We'll be bringing a couple of new presenters into the fold. So Robin, you'll be obviously in lots of stuff, but it's a big place, the UK, and we can't expect you to be everywhere all at once. But the kind of the style of the films and capturing that very spooky storytelling is what's going to run through the channel.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be great fun. And we've done some already, haven't we? For sort of
Oxfordshire.
Yes.
So over on that channel, we'll have a whole sort of 4-episode series of haunted Oxfordshire, going right from places like Banbury, Bicester, Tame, all the way into Henley-on-Thames, and back round to here, Bampton, Witney.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay.
So yeah, all that to look forward to.
That'll be fun. That'll be great fun. Lots of activity over the next year or two, that's for sure.
Yes. Apologies if we haven't got to your questions. We'll wrap up shortly. Thank you everyone for watching.
It's been amazing. So many of you, and I'm so thrilled. It's been enormous fun. We've enjoyed it a lot. We will plan another one of these extraordinary opportunities to talk to you all directly. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you for watching. Yeah, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.